This is MyBlend Stories, and I'm Jeff Gerlach. Elaine Mantinan is a Spanish teacher at L'Anse Creuse High School North in Macomb, Michigan. When her principal approached her to be among the first educators in L'Anse Creuse Public Schools to pioneer their blended learning initiative, she was excited to take part. Over the past 2 school years, she's been designing, building, and teaching a blended Spanish course. We chatted about the infrastructure and course design considerations that needed to be made as part of this new course type. We talked about the culture building that is necessary to acclimate students to a blended learning environment after years of traditional schooling. She also shared her thoughts on proactive and reactive designs for differentiated student learning. Particularly, she's skilled at creating conversations that flow between the online and face-to-face environments, which encourages the kind of interactions that deepen language learning. This is her story.
Hi.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this. And
Yes. Excited. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Cool.
Could you start off telling us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got started being an educator and all that good stuff?
Okay, sure. I'm Elaine Mantinan, and I became an educator almost accidentally, actually. I started my college education with the intentions of being a lawyer, and I have always loved to travel, and I always have loved languages. And so in college, I wanted to see as many places as I could, do as many things as I could. So I ended up spending a semester in South America, spending a month in Spain, and kind of came back and my advisor said, well, it looks like you're going to be a Spanish major because you're already done with all the classes. So I still sort of had that idea, I'm going to go to law school. I did some volunteer work, internships with legal aid for immigrants and refugees. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just combine those two things, law and Spanish and culture, and it's going to be really awesome. And I was a TA. And so that was when I first had my real first experience with teaching. And I was probably pretty terrible at first, I would imagine, because I had no idea what I was doing. I had no training. I was just basically kind of told, here's the syllabus, these are your days, you teach on Tuesday and Thursday, and this is what you need to cover. And so over 2 years of doing that, I became a better teacher, but I still had that idea of, I'm going to be a lawyer. So I graduated, went to law school, and pretty much after the first day realized that this was not quite the right place for me. So I stuck it out for a year, but really by that second semester, I was already looking into what I could do to go back to get my teaching degree. So that's what I did. So now this is my 6th year of teaching.
Just like that, huh?
Just like that, all of a sudden.
It's kind of interesting, you talking about your TA experience and how you were kind of just thrown into it. And here's the syllabus, here's what you do, and ready, set, go. It's not too different from being a first-year classroom teacher, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I just remember the professor took me in and said, okay, here's Elaine. She's the TA. Adios. And
right.
I was just oh, hi, everybody.
So I did my student teaching in Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. And the very first day I got there, I met my cooperating teacher, and he was like, okay, here's the bathroom, here's the classroom, here's the teacher lounge, and here's the keys to all those places. I'll see ya in April.
Okay.
It was January. He had to go run the testing stuff, so a lot of times it's sink or swim, right? But at that point, you didn't even know that you wanted to be a teacher, so that was kind of,
it was kind of crazy. I was sort of looking at it more as, well, I do need a second job, so that sounds like something that would be fine.
Right. So did you kind of fall in love with the language then? Is that what drew you most to teaching, or?
Yeah, I think it's partially the subject matter. I like the language, but the reason I sort of fell in love with learning languages is because it just opens up another world. And so being able to communicate with people, I love to travel, so that helps in that regard too, but just different conversations that you can have with people that you wouldn't be able to otherwise, and just the opportunities, in that sense. But I think with teaching too, it is kind of, to a certain extent, even if you're not teaching, Spanish or German or whatever, you're still translating things, you're still reframing things and helping people to communicate and be able to express themselves. And so I think there's a lot of that in teaching that's, something that I really like about teaching as a profession.
Taking that's the bedrock that your zeal for teaching is rooted in. How does blended learning come along and become a companion to that zeal?
Okay, so I think what, one thing for me with teaching is that I never want to be stuck in a rut. I never want to be, in one place. I'm always, just like with traveling, I want to see new things. I want to talk to new people. I want to do new things. I want new opportunities. And so when I was asked by my principal, hey, would you be interested in this? I jumped on it right away because yeah, it's something that my district had decided we're going to start this program. And so the opportunity to be one of the first people to do it, to get in and be part of the development and the creation of it, in that aspect really appealed to me. The other thing is, just from my own experience, from my friends and my family members' experiences of the way that education is changing, I do think there's so much that we need to be able to communicate to kids about using technology and being able to kind of handle that, not pressure exactly, but handle that demand of there's a body of material online that's required for the class that you need to be able to access, that you need to be able to navigate. And so being able to do that for students and give them almost like a head start, in high school, to have that, that skill base in their higher education, to me, that was a really cool opportunity.
So you get presented this opportunity. What was step one? And what was the first couple steps, right? Like, give me the origin story.
The rundown. Okay. So yeah, the first initial conversation was just the principal of my school having a conversation with me in his office. And so from there, they kind of had decided in my district, we have 2 high schools, and we also have another school where we have our math and science and technology program, and we have performing arts and stuff there. So they sort of had the idea that they wanted to have 1 class at each building, or maybe 2. And so they had interested teachers meeting, and we had a meeting, and they talked kind of, this is what we want to do. We want to have a class where some of the days students are meeting in class face-to-face, and some of the days they have material that they're accessing online. We're not sure exactly how we're going to arrange it, how we're going to organize it, but that's what we want to do. And so the first couple meetings were really just exploring what are other districts doing around our area. We went and visited Fraser. They're doing tons of cool stuff with blended learning. What are people around the country doing? What are people in the nation doing? What works for us? And just sort of adapting materials that we had found to make it fit, for us. So we started, I think that was in probably like the winter, and then the following fall we started the class.
So you did a lot of case study research to begin with.
Yeah, I think because, the initial idea, somebody has a great idea. We should do this. That would be a cool opportunity, for our kids, for our students, for our district to be able to offer that. And then bringing it from somebody's great idea into reality, the steps of that, looking at sort of what procedures, what policies do we need to have in place, what classes are we going to do, what teachers are we going to have teaching, what students are we going to pick, the process of what forms are we going to have them sign, what's, all the the formatting that they have to do for the attendance program, and, just all the, like, technical side of it, too.
With your session at McCall, something that kind of stuck with me was how detail-orientated you seem to be about at least the peripheral stuff. Everything that needed to be accounted for as far as parents were concerned, how students were going to transition from a really traditional kind of experience to something that was different, right? You talked a lot about planning and preparation.
Mm-hmm.
How intense was that planning and preparation?
Well, there was, like I said, just getting all the procedures set up, and, the district really wanted to err on the side of giving parents more information and just really making sure that everybody felt comfortable with where we were going with this. And so there was that, that aspect of the planning, and then there was also the planning for the course. So, after all this initial planning and, those sort of stages were done, it sort of ended up that there were 3 of us, really, the first year who did it. And so there was Shannon, who was presented with me at McCall, and I both teaching Spanish 5. So it was also the first year that our district had offered that course. So we started a middle school program a while back and sort of transitioned that now, where we have students who are able to get to 5 or 6 years of Spanish. And so it was sort of complicated by that factor, too, because the fact that the course really didn't exist as a course before it was a hybrid course, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we taught this class and then we just transferred it to being a hybrid class. It was like we built the whole thing from the bottom up.
Do you think that, obviously it's going to make it more difficult in the short term, I guess, because you're building everything from scratch, right? So it's quite labor intensive. But, in my experience, a lot of times when, if you take like a long-standing course and try to retrofit it into a blended environment, sometimes old habits die hard, right? Like you had the affordance to just completely design it from scratch.
Yeah, and actually Shannon and I have had conversations about that before. Do you think this would be easier if we already had everything established and we were just sort of transferring it? Or, is it cooler, is it better because we can just take stuff and find things that we want to fit the task we want to accomplish? And so, yeah, like you're saying, you're not getting stuck in a rut that this is what we always do in Spanish 5 because there isn't one. There's nothing there. So we've never really come to conclusion, I guess, definitively. Usually when we're frustrated about finding stuff, that's when we, start that conversation. You think it'd be easier if we had all this stuff already set up?
and to a certain extent, you'd never know.
Yeah.
It's been created now, and it never existed before. So,
but I think we both really like that freedom, and it is nice to have each other to bounce ideas off. And we don't always do the exact same thing, but to have somebody you can really talk to, like that's really awesome to have that. To say, thinking about doing this activity, how do you think that would work, and bouncing ideas back and forth.
Speaking of those activities, I'm fishing for something that I didn't quite hear, but
okay.
I think is there from your presentation, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So here was the situation. You had a bunch of discussion threads up on the board during your Q&A part of your session. And there was a woman who was asking specifically when and where you do... Oh, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but like, how do you structure your online conversations, basically? And to me, more so than just like that specific question, one of the initial questions with teachers that are getting into the space, it's kind of like, give me a checklist of what goes where and when. Tell me exactly how I structure these things so that students do it, right? Like, so there's 2 things here. Like, I want a cheat sheet for what environment is best, face-to-face or online, for each thing that I'm doing. And then I want you to tell me that when they're in this online space, I'm fearful that they're not going to follow my directions because I feel like I have a loss of control. So like how do I create accountability? And one of the questions she was asking is like, how many responses do you require of them? What do you do to get them to thoughtfully reply to someone else? Like real specific questions about producing responses from students. And I loved how you said, well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the situation, and I do a bunch of different things. You talked about the structure and how you had to set everything up. I bet once you got into practice, like it started to get way more nuanced than just that cold, calculated, this is what we're going to do here and this is what we're got to do there. Can you metacognitively like go to that space for me and tell me a little bit about it?
Okay, I think kind of what you're going to is how do you explain to a blended teacher what format is best for discussions? Is that kind of where you're going with that?
That's the starting point, yeah. But
Okay.
just more so just any sort of interaction at all, like your design process.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, total disclaimer, it's not always perfect and it's not always what I expect. And sometimes my expectations are exceeded and sometimes we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and start again. But, I think it's just like anything, like with teaching, you're always thinking where are we headed with this? What do we want to get out of this? What do we want students to be able to do or to accomplish after we're done with this? And so I never have approached it as, okay, well, I'm going to do 10 discussion boards during the semester, and on 5 of those, they're going to have to respond 3 times, and on 2 of them, they're going to have to respond 4 times. And so there's never, for me, been any specific guidelines or restrictions, and so I sort of have used it, how I think it's best,
Right.
And so with the different types of discussions, yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm asking a question and they're answering just like their own response. And sometimes they're answering and they can't see anybody else's answers until they respond. And sometimes they have to, ask a question and somebody has to answer. Or they have to post something and they have to reflect on a couple other people's. And I think, one of the things that I mentioned before is sometimes if I want it to just kind of end there, they'll respond more, if that makes sense. I think when I want the discussion to be contained to online, that's what I'm pushing to see, okay, you have to post for yourself and then you have to, post on 3 other people's. Because to me, it's kind of like by then, they're sort of over talking about it. The discussion has been entirely encased in the online discussion board, which is fine, and sometimes we do that. But so I think, and this is something that, the second time around, this is my, second year doing it, where I've found more that people are more willing to discuss it and keep the conversation going if it's not a forced, you have to go in and answer 3 more people. Go post, in my most recent one, they had to go in, answer the questions for themselves. They can see what other people said, and sometimes the students will like browse to get ideas before they answer. But then, I wanted to bring that discussion back to the classroom. And so I just sort of used that discussion board as an idea conversation starter, wanting that conversation to continue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think you can hear the content informing that decision making. I mean, it's language learning, right?
Right, yes.
And so a lot of what you do is going to revolve around conversation, right? And
yeah, I mean, definitely.
So I really like how you talk about how certain conversations will live in the online environment completely. Mm-hmm. And intuitively have a discussion. I mean, everything is based around inquiry, right? You're a lot less concerned about the expectations of the quantity of work and much more concerned with crafting the correct inquiry that will make them wonder and be engaged in having that conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's certain types of questions. I mean, and it depends on the subject matter too, but maybe different ways you can phrase questions that make people more interested or more likely to, want to see what other people have to say. One of my best ones I think I did, we were talking about beauty, I think, and we had to post a picture of you when you were younger, like 8 years old, and then a picture now. And so then we were talking about who had changed the most. And so that was a cool one because they wanted to see, what each other looked like and what they had to say about it. And, some of the responses are kind of goofy, like, just kids like joking around with each other. But it was cool to see like how they had actually looked at each other's and they had actually read what they had to say and thought about it and, and wanted to talk about it still the next day in class face to face too. So that was a good one.
After the next day in class that they were talking about it, what's the longevity of something like that? After the next assignment has kind of come down, like, do they have a long shelf life with that? Does it feel much more like a vibrant community, or does it really feel like very linear as they go across?
I mean, to me, something like that, and a lot of what I would think the discussion board is for, it's building that community. It is building that sense of community, just like you would have a discussion in class. And I think it's really important at the beginning of the class, if you're going to do a blended class, to establish that sense of community in the face-to-face part. And then, try to take that over into the online part too, because you want to make sure nobody feels isolated, nobody feels like they're off on their own, that, this is still a class. And so, yeah, I mean, something like that where you're looking at it, everybody looked goofy at some point in their lives, that like awkward picture of yourself, just even kind of remembering that, and you can chuckle about it later. So
you do a lot of... Would you say you do most of the rapport building face-to-face then? Can the online environment extend that kind of community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. And I think not to just always say it depends, but it really does depend on the student and the personality of the student, because there are some students who are more outgoing and they're more confident in a face-to-face situation. And there's some students who they probably know the answer, but they're not going to be jumping up and down to tell you. And so the online community can be a really good place for those students to get involved and to gain confidence in their skills, to feel more comfortable with the face-to-face communication. And so I think it really can go both ways, and both parts, to me, are important to building the community.
That's crazy. That's really awesome, like the way that you think about that, because like a lot of times we think of the online environment being a place where shyer students or students that just don't excel face-to-face can have a voice, right? But we don't always think about how that can impact their confidence when they come to a face-to-face environment.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that as we've gone throughout this journey, now this being the second year of teaching the blended class, there's so many unexpected, unanticipated benefits like that just sort of pop up from time to time, and you're just kind of like, wow, that's really awesome. I didn't predict that happened, but I'm really glad that it did.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So what's next? Like, what's what, let's do this. I imagine there's some frustrations that have come along the way, and probably ones that you have currently, right? And then and then that probably will lead nicely into us talking about what's next, right?
Okay. One of the frustrations is that in a blended class, it's a different environment. It is more independent for students, and so students really need to have that drive to succeed. They have to have a follow through. And yeah, there's kind of things in place to help students who are struggling with that, but it really does come down to the fact that there is a fair amount of stuff that you have to do on your own. And so there's always seems to be one or two students who really struggle with being the ones who are responsible for their own learning. I think a lot of times we hand students maybe too much, And so for this, the idea of I have to go online, I have to manage my time, I have to schedule it, I have to get the work done. If I have a problem, I have to talk to the teacher. The teacher maybe isn't going to come, to find me when it's online day. You know what I mean? So there's that.
Can I stop you real quick? Because I think that that's an important point.
Yeah.
How do students know how to ask for help? I assume that's part of the culture building.
Yeah, and that definitely is. And I think, one of the things that has helped with that, really, to be honest, is this year, being the second year, a lot of the kids who are in my class, they know somebody who had it before. And so they know, they've heard the expectation from their peers. And so that has helped a lot with that. But I think another thing, too, is I've gotten better with communicating and just saying every day, like 10 to 15 times for the first 2 weeks. If you have a problem, you have to contact me. If you have a problem, you have to contact me. If you have just repeating, and really reinforcing that message to say, if we have an online day and you're absent the day before and then you're absent again, and if I don't see you or I don't hear from you in 4 days and all of a sudden you show up and you tell me you were absent, that's not good enough, because you weren't in class, but neither was the material. So wherever you were, you had access to it. So you needed to start, taking that responsibility. So they are good with that, though. I think as long as you communicate that expectation and you reinforce it enough, I tell my students, I don't care when you email me. I'm probably not going to answer you at 2 a.m., but if you have a problem, you need to email me right then and there, so that I know,
You have to have those conversations, because when, a student's responsible for their own learning and, to a certain extent, the well-being of the community, but mostly focused on their own learning, where a teacher is responsible for everyone. So it only makes sense that there has to be that kind of conversation needs to take place, so that there's a protocol. So it seems like there's a good one there. I'm interested also on the flip side of things. As a teacher, do you feel like having a blended classroom, and particularly like introducing these online elements, do you feel like it's made you more adept at recognizing when a student is struggling and being able to respond swiftly to that? Or do you think it has served more as a veil to kind of hide some of those situations where a student's struggling?
No, I don't think it hides the strong points about the online classes, because there is, I think, almost more accountability, because you have that face-to-face classroom, but then you have the online, and so you have like so many things, going on, that there's so many ways to catch, a student who's struggling. Because we all know, realistically, in a class of 30 kids, in a 52-minute or 50, whatever, however long you have, are you going to be able to have a meaningful conversation with every single person? No, you're not, just being realistic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But in an online space, you are able to have more meaningful conversation, you feel, like one-on-one with students?
Yeah, and there's more time, right? And so you maybe have a really great idea, but the kid sitting next to you had his hand up first. So I'm talking with him, and he kind of gets the floor. And then all of a sudden, I want to talk with Jeff, but the bell's about to ring. And so when it's an online, when there's an online element, there's no bell ending the conversation. And so you still you have to put your 2 cents in, and so then I can see, where you're at with the skills I'm looking for.
Right.
Another thing that really is helpful with the way we have the class set up is we have, all the students and all the parents have to sign the online learning contract. So as soon as a student starts to struggle, slips below 70%, they have to show up every day. Or it's also written in there, anytime the parent or, I as the teacher or the administration, anybody at any point could say, you have to be here on the online day. And it's not a punishment. It's there for help. So I'm there every day. I usually have 2 to 6 or 8 students in my classroom. Some of them for different reasons, transportation. But there's some who come in and they'll say, hey, I didn't quite understand what that article was saying. Can we go through it together? And so there's a lot more opportunity to work one-on-one, where that student maybe wouldn't feel comfortable to raise his hand and ask in a classroom of 30 people. When it's one or two or three, coming in, and then I have the whole time. I can spend, the whole hour working with this one kid. Like, that to me is one of the best things about this format.
Well, when you offload the backbone of your course, and it seems like really the backbone of your course is present in that online environment. And it's not to say that the backbone isn't in the classroom, but like as far as the linear scope of lesson design, you have to be pretty well articulated in that online environment so that you can kind of push kids. Kids can push forward at their own pace and not even. I bet most kids don't even talk to you on a daily basis, but a handful you work with hands-on a day-to-day.
Yeah, sometimes when they come in on those days, they want to chat with me, or, I had a solid group last semester who had math class together, and they would come in and do math work together, in my classroom. So yeah, it's not always just that, Spanish.
Yeah, so what does pacing look like then? You talk about helping a student that's struggling in the face-to-face. Like, obviously you have due dates and things like that, but things it's not like a traditional pacing guide, right?
Yeah, I mean, we still have material that we, set out, that we've established as our curriculum. We're going to get here, 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 and here. But, just like I guess you would do in a normal class, you can modify for students as needed. But, one of the nice things about the online component is I can put up, 10 extra resources in a folder that just says resources. And then when I see somebody struggling, I can say, go to the folder. You need to do practice activity number 5 and 6. And then it's not like I'm calling them out in front of the class, but I'm pointing them in the direction of where they can get some extra support.
Gotcha. And a language, it makes a lot of sense for that, right? Like, yeah. So much. I mean, if something's missing, you need X, so you direct them to go and get it. So it's like you're being very responsive in your differentiation at that point, as opposed to predictive, right?
Yes. And I think that's kind of, the online part has so much of, it's like a diagnostic tool, in some ways too. Like we were saying, you can just you see it more.
Let me take that back, because there is a certain degree of preemptive differentiation in there, because you're putting together these folders where you have like these supplementary materials. And as you're putting those in there, you're really thinking about what kind of deficiencies these are going to meet. You'll know them when you see them, and you want to have it on hand so that it's easy access when you need it.
And I mean, I'm not always like, I don't think I'm not that good. I don't always know, but I may see, okay, I saw the same 2 grammar errors in 15 papers, so I'm going to go on right now and put up that folder so you can see, direct those people there later. So it's not always preemptive, but...
Yeah, there's a lot of experience in forming it, though.
Yeah, definitely.
How that's... So, like, as transitioning from what you've done in the, the like traditional teaching in the past, and then also your first year teaching in this blended format, and now moving into where you're at now, I'm sure that you're learning as you go along too about how to kind of flesh out these things. You kind of got the shell of these lessons, and through students kind of testing it out and everything. I mean, that's really where the differentiation comes in, right?
Yeah, but I think that, being open and honest with the students too, to say right from the beginning, this is something new. This is something that we're working on, and sort of just saying, I need your feedback. If this isn't working for you, or if you want something else, or you need something else, or I need to slow down, or, just having that conversation, back and forth. Like we're making that, to a certain extent, we're making this together, and we're figuring that out together.
Yeah, that's just it's a great thing that you got going on. I seriously I totally could pick your brain all day long. I kind of feel like I need to listen to this, edit it, and then reconnect with you at some other time.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I love to talk about it because I think it's so fascinating, and I think because it's just so exciting, all the things that can come from this. And I just think I'm so glad that we're doing this for our students because there's just so many skills that they need to have that we're, hopefully getting them to the point where they feel comfortable and confident with mastering this, in higher education and feeling ready to go with it. But
you think you've evolved as an educator, but as a person too, just going through this process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certainly things that or aspects, that are outside my comfort zone too. So, I mean, that's one of the things, like I was saying, that really attracted me to this in the beginning is because it is sort of pushing me to do more and not to get just, stuck in a rut. So yeah, definitely.
Well, hey, Elaine, thanks so much for talking with me.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing with your students. It's fascinating and it's awesome. I hope that this does it justice, and it's only my small part in kind of sharing what you're doing and kind of shining a light on that stuff, because I think so many people can benefit from hearing your stories, and hopefully they'll connect with you and can continue learning with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about it more. I think that it's really cool. One of the things about going to McCall is you have all these conversations with people, and then everybody sort of goes back to their own building, their own world. And I think that there's a lot of us probably out there now who are in the beginning stages of this, and so it's neat to connect with people who are sort of going through the same thing, and being able to have a conversation about this moving forward.
Thanks for listening to MyBlend Stories. For more, visit myblend.org.